Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Bob here at the Vitality Project. Welcoming our guest tonight, our returning guest, very special guest, Angela McLeod.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, nice to have you with us, Angela. Tonight is our debut of a new application, StreamYard, which allows us to access audio on both Facebook and YouTube. So fingers crossed, okay, as we embark. And I want to mention something. Last night, Angela and I were just speaking. We got a chance to join together with Jason last night, a partner here at the Vitality Project. And Angela was able to write in comments. And for the first time, we were able to see them in real time. So I'm really delighted to offer that tonight to our audience. So anybody who's watching, feel like you can fully participate. I've got here, because I'm the host, I've got here a chat box or chat room. And if you write any comments, I'll share those with Angela, and we'll do our best to respond here in real time. And as always, if you catch this later, be sure to write your comments in the comment section of the chat room. And Angela and I can come to that later in either Facebook or YouTube. So we're delighted to be here. Okay, great. Our topic of the week has been looking at what we can do to address our so-called shadow, the parts of ourselves that are hard for us to share with ourselves and with others. I see Kathy is with us. Wonderful, Kathy. Thanks for joining Angela and me. Soul, Kathy. So we've been looking at the shadow. We've been calling it shadow work as part of what we can do to manage our lives and actually open up and liberate our best energies. And one of the that we talked about in today's post was that we don't need to do this alone, that in fact it's actually facilitated at times. You can find trusted souls that provide a safe, secure haven to begin to share, to explore into places that are maybe next to impossible alone, but it really takes a special person. And the terminology I used in today's post, and our response, by the way, Angela, I used a term out of psychology, which refers, some people have therapeutic personalities. And it's wonderful when that turns out being somebody that you see as a therapist. There's no guarantee that a therapist is going to be a therapeutic personality. And there's plenty of therapeutic personalities that don't choose to be therapists by profession. And if we look at therapy in terms of its root understanding, the root word in Greek simply means healing. So therapy means healing. So we're talking about healing personalities. And I loved Angela's response, but I'm not going to cite it. I'll let you share your reflections, including I'd love to hear you share some of your response to today's post. Just this whole topic of therapeutic personalities to aid us as we begin to delve into shadowy parts of our personalities.
Yeah, wonderful topic. As usual, your posts get me to really thinking and percolating on the topic. And I think I just made a short note in the post today. I just included I included other, groups. Sometimes our therapeutic others can also be a group. And one of the first, one of those for me was going to AA meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous, and there have been lots of other types of groups too. Refuge Recovery and Recovery Dharma have also been groups that were therapeutic for me, healing, safe, and probably more often it's been just a one-on-one relationship where I could really bring forth some of the more scary, difficult, shadowy sides of myself or issues that I face. So then I also got to thinking about something I think I heard from you. I think I've heard it from others, maybe you and is it Michael Morar?
Yes, Michael Morar.
That the relational field is where healing happens. The relational field, that meaning the field. But when I use that term in this context, I mean it's you, it's me, and it's the us. It's the us and the in-between, which you brought up recently too, the sacred in-between. And so I think I've heard that a number of times in the recent years, but previous to that, I had a kind of an unconscious concept that I had to do all of my own work, my own healing, my own inner work by myself, mostly, maybe with a therapist, but certainly I had to do it all before I was even worthy of actually having, regular healthy relationships. So for me, it's been a little bit enlightening to also realize that it's always an ongoing process, and that a lot of kinds of relationships can be healing or therapeutic and can be safe for looking at my shadow work.
Yeah. Yeah. I like all that you're saying. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate you drawing on the power of groups as well as individual healing personalities, is that groups are made up of people, and ideally the groups that we've been in, the ones that you've named, have provided enough kind of critical mass of this kind of healing energy that the group has a personality. I certainly know, since I've made my living for most of my career by, among other things, running groups have their own chemistry, and sometimes the chemistry doesn't gel, and you can't seem to jumpstart it, no matter, can't resuscitate it. Other times groups surprisingly take on a life of their own, and there really is a healing field. Like I like you're using the term, there's something that goes on in the field between all of us that's really quite magical, and you just kind of sit back and witness it and participate and receive from it. So amen to our seeking groups. I really appreciate groups, self-help recovery support groups, like the ones that you mentioned, where we're actually encouraged, in fact, even expected to share parts of ourselves that we've been loath to do. And I would raise my hand about put myself, as I've shared with you before, right at the front of the crowd with this one, because I was really, really uncomfortable sharing shadowy stuff with others, primarily because I was uncomfortable sharing it with myself. But I just had deep instincts not to risk vulnerability. And I know that for me, for sure, Angela, my own addictive history was so much aided and abetted by the secrecy, by the fear of being shamed or rejected, and I just didn't bring it to people. And then you create this kind of vicious cycle, is that in my shame, I feel more and more bad about myself, more and more anxiety, more and more depressed. And then I self-medicate that, and there's even less reason to be transparent with people. So it's been a godsend to me to belong to groups like AA and Refuge Recovery and Integral Recovery and our conversations here at the Vitality Project, where we can begin to be open. Last Saturday we met with Kara from Lockdown Open Up in South Africa. She's doing the same thing. It's even in the title of her group, Lockdown, the time of lockdown with the virus pandemic and the quarantines involved. And can we use this as an opportunity to open up? And she is a poster child, in my opinion, really a primary exemplar of opening up to talk about things that we don't talk about. We had her last Saturday here on a Facebook Live event, and the whole conversation, I was moved to tears throughout it, because she's just so dadgum transparent. So it's those kinds of conversations, the ones that you and I have, what we saw last week with Kara, what's possible in groups, and what's possible with a few trusted confidants. They can absolutely transform our lives.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Any more reflections? Any more thoughts about this?
I'm sure. Yes. And I do want to say that it doesn't always happen in a group. Like I've been involved in where I live in Bellingham, Washington State. We have a lot of AA meetings. Like you can get one every day and several times a day. There's a lot here. And I went to a lot of different meetings, and some that I did not feel comfortable in at all. So just to say that brings me, kind of bridges into what you were saying too. How do you find the therapeutic other? It's not just any group. It's just because it's AA doesn't mean that it's going to feel that way for you personally. And I have been in, reminded me when I was reflecting on this, that even therapists or people who are in positions to be helpful in recovery, I'm sort of focusing on recovery because that we're here about addiction education. And there are treatment centers, there are all kinds of ways to get help with that. And I personally did have one experience, it's not the norm, where an administrator in a treatment program was shaming me for I had two problems at once. I had an eating disorder and alcohol abuse, alcohol addiction.
Yes.
And the treatment center was focused on alcohol. And basically they were telling me that they couldn't help me because I had two problems at once. But she went even further to, I'm not going to go into the details, but it was surprising to me how some people, even in a position to be helpful, actually can reinforce some of the stigma and the shame. And that still hangs in the air for me. So bridging to what you were saying, how do you find that the healing, the therapeutic others? I thought a lot about that too. And actually it's been a long time, over years of experimentation and having different therapists and different groups. And I'm sure you have ideas about that too. We've talked a little bit about, finding people who see us as a human being rather than seeing our problem. That's kind of a big red flag for me, or something I'm looking for, is that does the person see me and treat me as a full human being with respect and empathy and compassion.
I just came out of another conversation with another individual just in the last hour or two, where we were talking about how you can spot that in your gut pretty quickly. You can feel pretty quickly. And I thought occurs to me, Angela, as I'm listening to you, is over the years, 40 years now of seeing clients in psychotherapy and counseling and coaching, is that I'll meet with clients and I'll even suggest to them over the phone before we meet, why don't we meet and you get a feel for how it feels to you? And if it feels like there's a resonance and you'd like to embark on a journey together, let's try that. And if you don't, I want you to know I'll do my very best to help you find somebody that you do have that with. I think with very few exceptions in 40 years, I don't take it personally, because I've been on the other end of it. I've been in lots of therapy and supervision and groups and so on in my life. And you can just get this feel. Now, early on, 40 years ago, when I started graduate school, I don't think I had it. When I started my first course of therapy, I think I lucked out. I think I had a good therapist. I think the second therapist I had was not such a great fit. And it took me 2 years to realize that, so I feel like I really want to, you kind of, how you replay things in hindsight. You go, I think I had a feeling pretty early on this wasn't such a good fit, but I overrode that. And I don't want my clients to override that. I don't want any of us to. I think we have kind of I think of it almost like a Geiger counter that can kind of detect, is this person somebody that I resonate with? Is it somebody that I can trust? And I want to encourage people that I see to let me know how that feels. And that most people, I'm struck by this, and I bet you've had this too. This is part of the conversation I had a little while ago. Most of the people I work with, what they'll say, because my background's in psychology, is they'll say, Bob, I can't believe that you've got your doctorate in clinical psychology, because most of the psychologists I've worked with don't feel like it feels like being with you. I've had that feedback across my career, but particularly in the last 10 years of my being increasingly open, speaking of being transparent about our shadows, increasingly open about my addiction and my recovery. And clients will say that that's just so much the exception to their experience with therapists generally, psychologists, social workers, and so on like that. And I'm grateful to be able to bring the shadow side, which is so, in many ways, Jung didn't call it a shadow side because it's pleasant. It's really unpleasant stuff. It's really dark stuff. But I'm grateful to be able to bring that. And clients that I see now, they really resonate with that. Is that obviously I bring expertise like you do, Angela, and continue to hone that. And I feel like that's for us to always do that. But the piece that you and I bring that I think is the pearl of great price isn't all of the books on the shelf or all the trainings and all of that. I think it's really our heart. And I think I want to work with somebody who has a heart of compassion that I can lean on, that's available, that responds to me as a human being, not a thing. I was thinking about it this afternoon, knowing I'd be meeting with you. My first course in graduate school was from Neil Warren at Fuller, where I went. Neil was the dean of the graduate school I went to. And he taught a class called Clinical Foundations. And I think it might have been the first lecture. This is 41 years ago. And he talked about Carl Rogers, who he'd studied under. And Carl Rogers talked about prizing your client. I loved that term. I've never forgotten. And I was thinking of it this afternoon, that you could do worse as a criterion for who you're going to entrust with your shadow than being with somebody who you feel like when they look at you, when they interact with you, that there's a sense that they value you, that they really prize you, to use Carl Rogers' word. And I think that's a good one. That's a good one. And I don't think that's an intellectual thing. I think you can feel that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I agree totally.
Yeah. How has this gone for you in your own experience and your own reflections, both on both sides, both as a client of those that would provide help, or a friend who would share her shadow, as well as providing counsel for others in all the ways that you have and that you do, both professionally and personally, you know?
Wow. Well, I really coming more and more to see that it is this human to human heart level.
Yeah.
That is the healing thing, you know, regardless of the modality. I have more recently trained in and become certified in 𝗟𝗶𝗰 inquiries.
Yeah.
And that's a modality and it's certain kinds of tools. But I feel that so much of what I'm doing when I'm with a client is being myself in my heart with them and listening from my heart.
Yeah.
And I have tools, I have expertise in this particular modality. And it's very important, but it's so much, it's got to rest in this feeling of connection and at heart-to-heart level.
Yeah.
And that's what I have received. That's when I've been on the side of being a client or the person needing to share my shadow, to be heard, it's just across the board, almost regardless of the modality, whether it's a therapist or you know, nonviolent communication is another area where I have encountered this quality of empathy and healing between. And that's not a therapeutic model. That's a type of learning how to communicate with compassion. And I even broaden it out beyond human connection, because I have a special resonance with animals sometimes, where I feel that heart-to-heart connection, where it's not about intellectual verbal understanding. And I've been blessed to have some connections with animals where their presence, their loving energy has been huge, sometimes even more helpful to me than a person. You know, so I like broadening and encouraging. I guess I would just encourage people to really listen to where their heart feels safe to be seen and heard.
I really am glad you brought in animals. Thank you. You know, I've reflected lots in my own life across my history. I'm aware in our friendship that you have a very, very close connection to your cat, and have for these last years. And growing up through childhood, we always had lots of animals as a boy growing up. And I think as I was the youngest of three brothers, I was kind of assigned to be the one in charge of keeping them fed and taken care of. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for that. Cats and dogs, and for that matter, horses and cows and chickens, you name it, you name it. We had them. We had lots of rabbits. But I really think, especially through my elementary school years, we had a dog named Mac, a black terrier, that he was my confidant, and we went on long walks together for year after year. And I remember feeling such love from him. And it was a challenging home situation for me. I've talked about climbing up in walnut trees and finding peace and quiet up in walnut trees. Well, I did a lot of walking in orange groves with me and Mac by my side. And he was quite a therapeutic personality. So thank you for that. And I know, you know, even in your current life with pets. I went out right before this. I had a little break between my sessions today and our meeting. And I went out and I sat on the back patio. It didn't happen tonight, but often as I go sit back out there, we have a hummingbird that comes to frequent our back patio. We have some flowers out there. I call her Miss Hummingbird. And I have a relationship to Miss Hummingbird. I love Miss
Yeah.
Hummingbird. She didn't happen to be there tonight, but I love your expanding creativity to include, for sure, human beings and animals. And right outside my window here, I've got jasmine vines that are wafting through. They become part of what's healing. So we don't have to limit ourselves, do we? That feels good to expand this. Eckhart Tolle has a book, and I cannot call the name of it to my mind. And I've actually given this as a gift to a few friends, including my daughter. He talks about animals as being guides, and he has a special title. And I wish I could remember the title of the book. It'd be a book that you would love if you haven't read it. And it's a book about how it is that animals are really just what you just said. They're spirit or soul guides, they're companions. And he's got a whole book to that effect. And I recommend it, and I'll remember the title, of course, after we finish. But let's stay open to all positive support and all positive influences, for sure. Yeah. Well, I want to wind down in just a minute, but I'd like to give you the last word. If you have any final thoughts that you want to share as we close up.
Yeah, let's see. I find it interesting, this whole topic of the shadow, and I feel really like a beginner with it, you know, as far as really understanding what is the shadow. And as you have put in the posts, you know, those things which we're maybe afraid to share with other people, which is a huge part of it in my experience too. But I also have identified that it's not always a negative thing that's part of my shadow. And I also, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I consider my shadow to be, access to my shadow to be in my dreams. So my dream life is an access to what is my shadow. And I think that it's something, I think I've heard somewhere that the shadow is partly or totally our unconscious, and that we're not able to actually be conscious of it all at once. So I think what I'm trying to get at here is that I don't control what comes from up to awareness from my unconscious. I can't just turn that on or off, but I can choose to make a space for it. And so if that is with another person, when I'm dealing with my uncomfortable stuff, you know, the hidden stuff that I'm afraid to share, but then there's also stuff that comes up when I give my body time to move without structure, or I give my creative source, my dance self, time to move. And so I think what I'm trying to get at here is that I have to make time for that, and to just say, I'm open, I'm listening. What do you want me, what do you want to show me or tell me right now? What am I ready to look at? And so it's partly bringing in that idea of being gentle and just taking a little bit at a time and not trying to force it. Because sometimes when we get into a seeking the healing, we want to get fixed and get better. I know I've had a tendency like, okay, let me fix it all and get it over with, you know. And so I'm learning to be more patient and to notice what arises that I'm ready to deal with.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. Yeah. Really appreciate your emphasis on a humility and a non-directiveness and a non-fixing, you know, like this isn't about fixing something. I'm reminded of a couple of things. Synchronistically, Kathy Sargent is online here. Kathy makes a comment that she was trained in Santa Barbara to work with a horse whisperer as part of an internship in working in a recovery treatment center. And Kathy, you're hearing me right now. I want you to know this. Kathy, when I was with you in Santa Barbara at Pacifica, I met Kathy. She was in my, I was on a year of sabbatical. My first sabbatical was at Pacifica. And I met Kathy. We've known each other now for nearly 30 years. And Kathy, while I was there, James Hillman came to the campus. And you'll remember he came to speak. I was actually living in a home connected to Pacifica. And I walked into my room one night and somebody came knocking on the door. It was a large home and opened the door. It was James Hillman. He says, "Who are you?"
Wow.
I'm Bob. Who are you? I said, "I know who you are." James Hillman at that point was one of the preeminent Jungian analysts on the planet. He was really a hugely influential scholar in the Jungian world, largely and personally for me, was one of the handful of most influential people. And while Kathy, while we were at Pacifica, he went by Jim. I only ever called him Dr. Hillman, but okay, I'll compromise and call him James. James talked about how it is that he had written a book called The Dream in the Underworld, and then he referenced that book, and he said, when Jung or Freud talked about the unconscious, they meant it's unconscious, which is really what you're saying. And in that book, it's one of the best books. I used to use this when I taught courses on dreams, The Dream and the Underworld. He really would support what you're saying about a humility in the face of the unconscious. In fact, Hillman had the view that if you have a dream and you can make sense of it lickety-split, then probably you don't understand the dream. Because he says the unconscious isn't going to mess around. And if it's going to try to bring you messages, they're not going to be ones that are easily necessarily understood nor assimilated. So you best back off and let the, like you said, show me what you want to teach me, and so on.
Yeah.
So I really want to support you in that. I also I noticed that Kathy, you talked about that you affirmed what Angela was talking about in terms of animals, and this includes equine therapy and other really innovative approaches to working with therapy, including in treatment. My first exposure to equine therapy was up at Passages in Malibu. I'd never even heard of it before. And client after client got really engaged in that in a meaningful way. My dear, dear friend, Keith McMullen, who later became clinical director at Passages, his first job there was as a therapist. And so he had training in it. And I would sit with Keith and talk about it. And it's really what we're talking about. It's allowing this being, this animal, this horse, to teach us, to lead us, to heal us, and it takes it very, very seriously. So I want to thank you, Kathy, for bringing that to mind. It hadn't occurred to me. I want to thank you, Angela, for bringing dreams in here. That really is Freud felt like the dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. I mean, that's how we get to find out what our unconscious is, and so our dreams are very, very useful. So I want to support that. A lot of resources there. We're not done. Yeah. In fact, we'll be back on Saturday, right, Angela?
Yeah, I will. Yeah,
we'll be talking about shadow on Saturday. We're wrapping up we're coming to the end of this first year, right, with the Vitality Project, and we're wrapping up kind of the themes and the organization of this. We're going to be moving into some exciting things. Actually, in the month of July, including a new workshop that we'll be doing through the Vitality Project. We will be continuing daily posts. We'll be taking a slight break from rolling out of bed with Dr. Bob. I've got several audio posts that I'll be doing over the next week or 2 weeks, and then we'll be moving back into a new phase. Jason and I will meet tomorrow night with everybody who's here to announce some more of the specifics of that. In the meantime, please put on your calendar that Angela and I will be back here at Facebook Live on Saturday morning at 11 o'clock Pacific time. And we'll be concluding this segment on the shadow. We certainly won't have exhausted it, that's for sure. And I know that we'll be weaving in more conversations about shadow work over time. So anyway, I want to thank you, Angela, so much for joining us tonight. I appreciate your insights as always. Kathy, thank you for joining us. I got so engaged with Angela that I didn't want to stop and write you right now and respond. I think I'll do that if I can without losing you. If I lose you, I'll write back to you through Facebook. And I want to invite anybody who wants to respond to Angela or me to do that. It's been wonderful, Kathy, to have you join us tonight. And I want to thank Optimal Self for joining us, Jeremy at Optimal Self. And I wish everybody a good evening. We will continue with the shadow. Be well, everybody. Stay healthy and take good care, all right?
Bye.
Good night for now. Bye-bye, Angela. Good night. Bye-bye, Kathy. Bye-bye.